The Subcommittee on Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Recovery will come to order. The subcommittee is meeting today to receive testimony on examining climate change, a threat to the homeland. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the subcommittee in recess at any point. I'd like to say good afternoon to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us today, to our witnesses as well as our amazing members. We are here today to discuss climate change and our nation's response. Climate change is a major threat to our country. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security's mission is to, and I quote, secure the nation from the many threats we face, unquote. Therefore, the department's mission includes taking action to address the effects of climate change. Already, the impacts of climate change on communities across the country extract devastating human and financial costs. And if we fail to address the challenges posed by climate change, those costs will only increase. Science concludes that climate change is real, and it is increasing the severity and the frequency of extreme weather events. According to NOAA, during 1980, the U.S. has sustained close to 300 weather and climate disasters, like catastrophic hurricanes, flooding, and wildfires, where overall financial damages reached or exceeded $1 billion, and the total cost of these events now exceeds $1.9 trillion. In 2020, for example, multiple extreme weather events like Tropical Storm Eta and Hurricane Sally, to name only two, severely impacted the ranking member and my home state of Florida and the southeastern U.S. region, and each storm respectively resulted in more than $1 billion of financial damages for the U.S. Last week, the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, acknowledged the serious risk the climate crisis poses to the U.S. and global economy, stating, and I quote, "There is no doubt that climate change poses profound challenges for the global economy and certainly the financial system," unquote. Since 2013, including in 2021, the U.S. Government Accountability Office included the federal government's fiscal exposure to the risks of climate change in the office's high risk list report. To save lives and to lower the federal government's fiscal exposure to climate change, GAO stated, and I quote, "The federal government needs a cohesive, strategic approach with strong leadership and the authority to manage risks across the entire range of related federal activities," unquote. Reports released by both the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. Department of Defense categorize climate change as an urgent, growing threat based on its ability to cripple critical infrastructure, deplete military resources, and fuel terrorism. Despite the pressing need to address the risks posed by climate change, and despite the progress that has been made by the Obama administration, President Trump disregarded these challenges, increased the likelihood that Americans would experience these risks, and took steps to eliminate federal research and response climate change programs. In contrast, through multiple executive orders on the climate crisis and by providing $1 billion to communities through FEMA's pre-disaster building resilience infrastructure and communities program, and through the Biden administration's plan to invest in resilient critical infrastructure through the American Jobs Plan and the administration's budget proposal, President Biden continues to take swift and bold action to restore America's leadership on climate issues and confront the risks posed by climate change. In preparing for and responding to the effects of climate change, DHS, FEMA and the broader federal government must include conscious planning for racial and socioeconomic disparities. And that is why the Biden administration is taking action on environmental justice issues through the creation of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council and other initiatives. Additionally, DHS Secretary Mayorkas has also taken steps to inform the department's climate response programs to include the goals of advancing equity and increasing resilience for vulnerable and high-risk communities. Responding to climate change will take a unified effort among federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial governments and private sector partners and President Biden's leadership, along with the sustained focus by members of this subcommittee, are essential to that effort. It is with sincere gratitude that I again welcome our witnesses here today. Thank you all for agreeing to share your insight with this subcommittee and with the public. We look forward to hearing your testimony. It is now my pleasure to recognize the ranking member of this subcommittee, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Kamek, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I hope y'all can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. It's a little difficult when we're all out in the field. You never know exactly what kind of broadband connection you're going to get. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Chairwoman Demings. 2020 saw one of the worst fire seasons in history, burning millions of acres along the West Coast. And in February of 2021, ice storms in Texas left millions without power or safe water to drink. In March of this year, a tornado outbreak caused widespread damage to several southern states. And in our home state of Florida, as the chairwoman and I are both proud to call Florida home, we are certainly no stranger to intense weather events. Just last year, Hurricane Sally flooded Florida's panhandle, dropping 4 inches of rain in just 4 hours. And in 2018, Hurricane Michael, well, we all know that it devastated Florida's Gulf Coast and was the first Category 5 hurricane to make landfall in mainland U.S. since 1992. Now, as we move through the second week of Atlantic hurricane season, it is important to remember that while we cannot control the weather, we can take steps to prepare. And it's pre-disaster mitigation efforts by individuals and policymakers, first responders, and emergency preparedness professionals that ensure that no geographic region of our country is left unsupported. Mitigation activities such as strengthening and upgrading existing infrastructure from all hazards, raising structures in identified flood zones, buying flood insurance to protect personal property, installing hurricane shutters and other protective measures, as well as clearing dead vegetation to reduce the risk of wildfire, all have the potential to limit the negative effects of natural disasters. FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Grant Program has helped communities implement hazard mitigation measures following a presidential major disaster declaration to reduce the risk of loss of life and property from future disasters. Now, Florida's 2018 State Hazard Mitigation Plan highlights four main goals with corresponding objectives to include implementation of an effective, comprehensive statewide hazard mitigation plan, supporting local and regional mitigation strategies, increasing public and private sector awareness and support for hazard mitigation in Florida, and support mitigation initiatives and policies that support the state's cultural, economic, and natural resources. These goals have been realized through recent mitigation projects. For example, the Hallandale Beach Drainage Project was recently completed using Hazard Mitigation Grant Program funds to address drainage issues that cause flooding throughout the city during storms. A new drainage project was also completed in Oakland Park using those same grant funds. Now, despite high tidal surges and high canal levels from Hurricane Irma in September of 2017, no floodwaters entered homes in Oakland Park communities that were served by this new system. Not only do mitigation activities aim to reduce injuries, deaths, and property damage, but they also limit the potential for damage to the economic sector. A December 2019 report by the National Institute of Building Sciences found that by designing buildings to meet the 2018 building code standards, the national mitigation benefit cost ratio is $11 for every $1 invested. The report also found that the impacts of 23 years of federal mitigation grants provided by FEMA, the Economic Development Administration, and HUD result in a national benefit of $6 for every $1 invested. Our approach to mitigation needs to shift from a pre-disaster mindset so that we are anticipating the need and not responding after the fact and after the damage has been done. I am encouraged by recent changes to pre-disaster mitigation funding, including the introduction of the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Grant Program. BRIC makes additional federal funds available to states, U.S. territories, Indian tribal governments, and local communities for pre-disaster mitigation activities. Now, as we've hardened and continue to harden our defenses against a potential terrorist attack, we must also be prepared for the devastating effects of a severe weather event. And as I've said, the chairwoman and I, being Floridians, I think we know this pretty much as well as anyone could. And the reality is, quite frankly, that the natural disasters have always occurred and they will continue to occur. We should use every single disaster as an opportunity to learn and improve our mitigation capabilities and strategies to decrease the loss of life and damage to our homes and infrastructure and to lessen the economic strain that these disasters present. I look forward to witnesses here today on how to continue our preparedness and resiliency in the face of unpredictable future natural disasters and all hazard emergencies. And at this time, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this letter from the Florida Division of Emergency Management highlighting their mitigation and resiliency projects. And
Without
with that, I
objection.
yield back. Thank you. And with that, I yield back to the chairman.
I want to thank the ranking member for her remarks. Also, I'd like to remind the committee that we will operate according to the guidelines laid out by the chairman and ranking member in their February 3rd colloquy regarding remote procedures. Without objection, members not on the subcommittee shall be permitted to sit and question the witnesses. I now want to again welcome our panel of witnesses. The first witness is Mr. Bill Nye, appearing in his own capacity. Mr. Nye is the CEO of the Planetary Society, a nonprofit organization working to advance scientific study, and co-founder by the famous planetary scientist Carl Sagan, Mr. Nye's former astronomy professor. Well known for his work in the fields of science and engineering and his popular television show, Bill Nye, the Science Guy. Mr. Nye has made it his life's mission to help foster a scientifically literate society, one ready to confront the threats posed by climate change. Our second witness is Ms. Alice Hill, the David M. Rubenstein Senior Fellow for Energy and the Environment at the Council of Foreign Relations. Ms. Hill's work for the Council focuses on climate change. Ms. Hill also serves as a special assistant to President Obama and Senior Director for Resilience Policy on the National Security Council staff, where Ms. Hill led the NSC's work on developing national policies to increase resilience to biological threats and climate change. Ms. Hill's public service also includes service within DHS as Senior Counselor to the Secretary in 2009. During her time there, Ms. Hill led the Department of DHS's first ever climate adaptation plan and the formulation of strategic plans regarding catastrophic biological and chemical threats, including pandemics. Our third witness is the Virginia State Coordinator for Emergency Management, Mr. Curtis Brown. Mr. Brown is the first African American to serve in that role. Mr. Brown is also the co-founder of the Institute of Diversity and Inclusion in Emergency Management. As a state official, Mr. Brown has played a key role in the state's climate change response efforts and has worked to ensure Virginians, including those in the vulnerable and high-risk communities, have access to resources, information, and support. Mr. Brown has also served as Deputy Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security, Regional Emergency Manager Administrator for the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, and was also a professional staff member on the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Homeland Security. Mr. Brown, welcome back. Thank you so much for being with us. And finally, but certainly not least, our fourth and final witness is Pamela Williams, the Executive Director of the Build Strong Coalition, a group of individuals and organizations with the stated purpose of building a more resilient America. Prior to her time with the coalition, Ms. Williams served as counsel for the U.S. House Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on Economic Development, Public Building, and Emergency Management. Ms. Williams also has experience working within the Federal Emergency Management Agency as Associate Chief Counsel for Legislation and Policy and as Deputy Director of Congressional Affairs. Ms. Williams, welcome back. We're so glad to have you with you. To all of our witnesses, thank you so much for being here. Without objection, the witnesses' full statements will be inserted in the record. I now ask each witness to summarize their statement for 5 minutes, beginning with Mr. Bill Nye.
Subcommittee, thank you indeed for the opportunity to testify before you today. It is an honor to share my thoughts on climate change and the threats our nation faces because of it. My name is Bill Nye, as you may infer. These days, I'm a science educator and a television presenter. I may be known to you and your families as the Science Guy. I began my career as a mechanical engineer working at Boeing. My professional license is still in Washington State. I worked on aviation's FEMA acronym, Failure Effects and Modes Analysis. I was paid to solve physics problems and figure out what could go wrong on a 747 airplane. I learned a great many things. First, a modern jetliner is an amazingly reliable, extraordinarily safe machine, largely because it is subject to good regulations. Second, commercial airplanes only get into trouble when they take off with something that's already broken. A system the crew thought was working isn't working, then several things go wrong at once. And when it comes to climate change, the analogy to things already broken, along with multiple problems developing at the same time, is compelling. Suppose Russian hackers had attacked the Colonial Pipeline while a hurricane was coming ashore at Gulfport, Mobile, or Gainesville. Recently, the entire state of Texas, as was mentioned earlier, was shut down because of a snap of cold weather. It was the product of years of insufficient failure effects and modes analysis. It killed almost 200 people. Along with the heartache, the cost is estimated at $130 billion. These miserable outcomes could have been avoided for a fraction of what we'll all end up paying. The pipeline hack was a mean-spirited thing and a lot of trouble. The mess in Texas was a disaster. But the next time, or the next times, may be much, much worse. Back in 1977, as you may have heard, I took a course from Professor Carl Sagan. It eventually led to my day job as CEO of the Planetary Society. And Dr. Sagan often spoke of what he called comparative planetology. By comparing Earth's atmosphere with those of Mars and Venus, scientists came to understand the importance of carbon dioxide and the greenhouse effect. You may have heard. Researchers at Exxon understood this too and wrote about the potential for disasters back in that same 1977. But we've done almost nothing about it. Greenhouse gases are inducing climate change here on Earth, and it's happening now on larger and larger scales. We're seeing bigger storms, more floods, more droughts, more fires, more loss of shoreline, and more businesses and people as the ocean swells. Therefore, the sooner we stop adding greenhouse gases to our air, the better off we have a chance of being. If we don't stop, more of these events will happen, more of them will happen at the same time, and that will increase the likelihood of convergent problems. It was stated earlier in her opening statement. The ranking member said we can't control the weather. It turns out we are controlling the weather. Inadvertently, by accident, we are controlling the weather, and we got to cut it out. Now, Everything on an airplane, from the wheel under the nose to the light on the tip top of the tail, is there for a reason. Anything extra that you put on an airplane would add weight, which would shorten the range, make the plane less efficient, make it more costly to fly. But even with that in mind, airplanes are required to carry all sorts of emergency equipment. Life vests, rafts, exit doors right in the middle that no one ever uses. You want the plane to have everything it needs to fly normally, but also everything it needs when things go wrong. These regulations are good. They keep us safe. So just like extra pieces and parts of an airplane that you don't need, we don't want regulations that we don't need. But when it comes to addressing climate change, regulations are essential. Having healthy neighborhoods where things do not stop working is a way to keep people healthy and working. It's why we have infrastructure like smoke detectors, fire hydrants, and all that plumbing, so firefighters can keep us and the built environment we rely on safe. Now, this is where you all come in, members of this subcommittee. We want all the rules we need to create all the systems we need to address climate change. Now, as you may know, I grew up right here in Washington, D.C. I rode my Schwinn bicycle to the first few Earth Day events on the National Mall. I locked my bicycle to a flagpole, probably not allowed these days. But back then, we emphasized individual actions. Every little bit hurts. That was one of the slogans. But when it comes to climate change, everybody need big ideas.
Mr. Nye,
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
14 seconds.
You're actually out of time, but if there's something more that you'd like to say, please do so during the question and answer period. So thank you so much.
I apologize for running over. I thought I had set a stopwatch dead on. I apologize.
It's okay, but thank you so much for your opening comments. At this time, I now recognize Ms. Alice Hill to summarize her statement for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Demings and Ranking Member Kemick, and members of the subcommittee for inviting me to testify today. As we've heard, climate change impacts are no longer a matter for the distant future. Last year, in the midst of a global pandemic, our country suffered 22 separate extreme weather events influenced by climate, each costing over $1 billion. And that's been going on for quite a long time, seeing the United States pummeled by worsened disasters from climate change. America is simply not doing enough to prepare for the heightened threats posed by a changing climate. The nation, in short, suffers from a large resilience gap. That gap needs to be closed to safeguard Homeland Security. Development of a national resilience strategy is essential, as you've noted, Chairwoman. Without a comprehensive approach, individual agency efforts could leave gaping holes in the nation's resilience to climate threats. The Department of Homeland Security can and should play a central role in the effort to build a national resilience plan. Core to resilience is improved risk communication. The United States lacks comprehensive risk mapping that is sufficiently downscaled to inform Americans regarding the risks they face now, much less those they face in the near future. That means that we have many families and businesses who today rent and buy facilities that are destined to burn and flood. The federal government should compile risk information in a way that's easy to understand, interactive, has a visual format that permits people to determine what's ahead. What does it mean for me? What does it mean for my family? What does it mean for my company? And what does it mean for the United States? Without that, it's difficult for us to make the kinds of risk reduction choices that we need to make. As Representative Kemick has stated, we need to prepare ahead. A national resilience plan would help us do that, and it would provide incentives to improve decision-making about where and how we build. As you know, land use and building code choices rest almost entirely in the hands of state and local governments in the United States. Currently, those officials encounter a moral hazard when they make choices about where building should occur and how it should occur, since they know that the federal government may well end up putting most or all of the disaster costs after disaster strikes. This moral hazard has led to risky development occurring in many places across the nation. We also need stronger building codes. As you've heard, according to the National Institute of Building Sciences, for every $1 we spent in disaster-resistant building codes, we can avert $11 in damages. But despite this astonishingly high cost benefit, 65% of cities and towns across this nation have failed to adopt modern disaster-resistant codes. The nation needs to accelerate the development and adoption of model building codes that account for future climate risk. To protect Homeland Security, the nation also must work to ensure that critical infrastructure continues to perform under new extremes. We saw this in Texas, as it's been mentioned. We will see this in California this summer when wildfires streak across that state, and we will see it as hurricanes that are predicted to occur this season hit the United States. When infrastructure fails, particularly the electric sector, it cascades, the damage cascades through all sectors: public health, transportation, communication. And we need to have resilient infrastructure that can take what we know will come with climate change. Climate change will also drive increased migration. We know that changing conditions can affect transnational crime, including terrorism. During extreme events, organized crime and extremists have been known to take advantage of a failed government response to expand their territory and increase recruitment. We'll also see increased pressure at our borders, as we're currently seeing with Central American immigrants. Immigrants that are seeking survival will move in the face of devastating climate events, either droughts or hurricanes, as we saw 2 back-to-back hurricanes this year in Central America. We need frameworks to get ahead and do this better, plan for where people will move. DHS should also continue to close the environmental justice gap,
Sil,
including
Ms. Hill?
fostering. Yes.
Phil, I'm sorry, your time is expired.
All right. Thank
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Curtis Brown to summarize his statement for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Demings, Ranking Member Kamick, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Curtis Brown, and I serve as State Coordinator of Emergency Management in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm also co-founder of the Institute for Diversity and Inclusion in Emergency Management. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the rising threat of climate change to the homeland from the perspective of an emergency manager, with a keen focus on the disproportionate impact of disasters on marginalized and frontline communities. Emergency managers all over the country have witnessed firsthand the consequences of climate change. We are responsible for working with communities to prepare for, mitigate against, respond to, and recover from disasters. The last decade has demonstrated the reality of the challenges we face with climate change: more frequent and devastating disasters that have stretched our limited resources and disproportionately impacted marginalized communities. In addition to coordinating the response to COVID-19 over the last year, emergency managers and communities were faced with major wildfires out west, a historically busy Atlantic hurricane season, heat waves, and more frequent flooding events across the country. These frequent disasters, both big and small, negatively impact individuals, marginalized individuals and communities in numerous ways. Research and data confirms that people of color, people with disabilities, women, low-income individuals, and communities suffer greater disaster losses. This is demonstrated in higher rates of death, injury, physical and mental, economic loss and poverty, abuse, and other lasting impacts. Systemic and structural racism, environmental injustices, and other inequitable and discriminatory policies and programs are the root cause for creating and enhancing the vulnerability faced by at-risk and marginalized individuals and communities. The threat of climate change requires bold action from the federal government, leadership, resources to support emergency managers and ensure that we prioritize those most at risk. That's why I commend President Biden for recently announcing the dedication of $1 billion for the BRIC Pre-Disaster Mitigation Program, with the portion specifically focused on supporting marginalized communities. Executive orders focus on advancing racial equity and supporting underserved communities and tackling climate change through a comprehensive whole of government strategy is to support local, state, and locals' need. All levels of government and sectors have responsibilities to respond to the threat of climate change and support at-risk communities. In Virginia, Governor Northam's administration has taken significant steps to address the challenge of climate change and further equity. We have initiated comprehensive adaptation planning efforts, ensured cross-agency and sector collaboration, and prioritized marginalized communities. Last year, Virginia was one of 5 states to submit over $200 million in projects for the 2020 BRIC Pre-Disaster Mitigation Grant Program. 40% of our grants projects submitted were from local governments with the highest vulnerability and at-risk populations, according to an equity analysis we conducted. We look forward to furthering our equitable mitigation efforts here in 2021 with the additional BRIC funding. I appreciate FEMA Administrator Criswell's leadership in prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion and responding to the climate crisis. It will go a long way with furthering FEMA's efforts and also support the entire emergency management enterprise. A recently released request for information from FEMA is intended to solicit input on how to integrate equity from FEMA within FEMA programs and regulations and policies. These are all welcome steps that will hopefully further disaster equity. But integrating equity in emergency management will not be easy or a quick fix. It requires a long-term, sustainable commitment, resources, and a willingness to support innovation to solve complex and deeply rooted inequities in programs and policies. Emergency managers need to be trained on how to integrate equity. Disaster equity leaders should be leveraged. We'll need to empower marginalized communities and frontline organizations and support and add support and support efforts to increase diversity within the emergency management profession. Simply put, doing things the same way will result in the same inequities we have seen as disasters increase. By taking these courageous steps and others, we'll be better prepared to meet one of the greatest challenges of the 21st century. Thank you, Chairwoman Demings, and I look forward to offering recommendations and answering questions from the subcommittee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brown, for your testimony. At this time, the chair now recognizes Pamela Williams to summarize your statement for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Demings and Ranking Member Kamick and the distinguished members of this committee. It is an honor for me to join you today to discuss disaster mitigation and how it intersects with climate adaptation and homeland security. And this conversation must serve as a core component of the national conversation of resilient infrastructure and communities. The Build Strong Coalition was actually formed a decade ago and is made up of an extremely diverse group dedicated to building a more resilient nation. We represent firefighters, emergency responders, emergency managers, insurers, architects, contractors, manufacturers, as well as consumer organizations and code specialists. Like you, the coalition recognizes that the increase in the frequency and severity of natural catastrophes in this country clearly illustrates the need for investments in the resilience of structures, the ones in which we live and work, and then, of course, the critical lifeline infrastructure that support our daily lives. In 2018, Congress did take several key steps in recognition of the unsustainable impacts of disasters by passing the Disaster Recovery Reform Act, or DURA. The true game changer, as we've discussed, it was the creation of an additional set aside of 6% in spending for the purpose of funding greater investments in mitigation before a disaster occurs. FEMA has taken that authority and last year launched the BRIC program. And certainly we applaud FEMA for their unprecedented efforts in developing and implementing this transformational program. But in its inaugural year, FEMA offered $500 million through BRIC, but they received almost $3.6 billion in requested projects. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell has stated that one of her top priorities is to build a new culture of disaster resilience. But we know that the resilience needs in this country far exceed the resources available. And new funding alone is not going to solve a problem of this magnitude. So the Friends and Alliances of the Build Strong Coalition have developed the following policy recommendations that we'll share with you. First, increase the funding for resilience before the next disaster, climate impact, or catastrophic failure. Mitigation saves lives, property, and taxpayer money. Mitigation also saves the environment And we know it's the smart use of federal resources and will save taxpayer dollars, anywhere from 4 to 11 for every dollar invested. But again, the resources are woefully inadequate. Second, we need to create incentives for building stronger and tie existing federal funding streams to the adoption and enforcement of strong modern building codes. Disaster resilient and sustainable construction and the use of stronger building codes has proven to save lives, reduce damage of natural disasters, and protect the environment. Adopting building codes is the single most effective thing that we can do to save lives and property. Third, promote the hardening of lifeline infrastructure. Lifeline infrastructure provides indispensable services that enable continuous operations of critical businesses and government functions, and without the prompt restoration, would risk health, safety, and economic security, key elements to Homeland Security. We also need to incentivize investments through tax benefits. We need to make it easier for individuals, businesses, and government to invest in resiliency. We need to ensure the use of resilient American-made products in the construction and retrofit of our key lifeline infrastructure. And finally, and maybe most importantly, we need to build capacity. We must ensure that states, locals, tribal governments, regional entities are given the tools and resources that they need to increase capacity and capability to even identify risks and hazards and mitigate those risks before the next crisis occurs. For this country to be successful in enhancing our resiliency, we must focus on capacity building at all levels of government, and then turn to considerations of sustainability, adaptability, and creative financial instruments that can be leveraged to drive socially responsible investments in resilience. This is also going to involve simplifying and streamlining programs, and this committee is going to need to focus on effective grants management and oversight so that we can leverage these investments systematically and systemically for national resilience. As we launch into the 2021 hurricane season, we're very excited to join thought leaders like you to identify opportunities for policy changes. We must invest in these federal resources so that we can ultimately save lives and livelihoods. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Ms. Williams. Thank you to all of our witnesses for your testimony. I will remind the subcommittee that we will each have 5 minutes to question the panel. I will now recognize myself for questions. While the impacts of the climate crisis will vary depending on the specific U.S. region, in my home state of Florida, policymakers must grapple with the challenge of a longer and more intensifying hurricane season. Additionally, as I'm sure you all know, sea level rise continues to impact our coastal communities, contributing to flooding and erosion hazards, saltwater intrusion, and changes to coastal ecosystems. Mr. Nye, please comment on the climate challenges in states like Florida and elaborate, if you will, on the impacts you expect the climate crisis to have on other regions of the U.S.
Thank you very much. So in Florida, we have a problem where water is coming over the shore. As the ocean gets warmer, it gets bigger. This is what causes sea level rise. Water's coming over the shore, places like Cape Canaveral, for example, and then water's also coming up through the limestone. And so there's an irony when you talk about diversity and equity, where people wanted to live near the shore in Miami Beach and Miami, two closely related but separate cities. But then as sea level rise comes over the top and up through the limestone, people want to live in higher ground. So the areas that used to be for favored by lower income people are now being gentrified. And this is evidence of climate change. And it's difficult to get insurance in some places where you park your car because salt water gets in the wheel wells. And so this is only going to get worse. We got to stop putting greenhouse gases in the air, and we've got to come up with new ways to provide electricity that's renewable and reliable to everybody. The co-chair, the ranking member made reference to you never know what broadband you're going to get. Well, let's make it so the broadband is always good for everybody. When neighborhoods are healthy for working, then people work more and stay healthier. But we need big changes, everybody. And I just reflect all the time on my parents who were both in World War II. My father was a prisoner of war for almost 4 years. My mother was one of the code girls working to decrypt German submarine radio traffic. Everybody in the country was involved in solving this global problem. Everybody was on it. So in many ways,
Mr.
I'm
Knight, that
excited
is
about the
such,
future.
you know what I love so much about what you just said though. Everybody cared about this. Was not a Republican issue, a Democratic issue. Everybody in the country was cared about this issue, and I think it's so critical to us getting to where we need to. I want to go quickly to Mr. Brown. You know, you talked about your perspective as an emergency manager. You're there on the ground. What are some of the on-the-ground emergency preparedness and response improvements you've seen at the local level since President Biden took office?
I think the conversation around climate change and the realness of the threat and the need to prepare has increased. And I think there's a greater focus on the mitigation and the pre-disaster mitigation. The additional funding, we have leaned forward and started to plan and work with our less resourced communities to support them in developing their grant projects. We anticipate that grant being released later this year. They are limited resource communities, both urban and rural, that we have to provide some additional resources to. They have a part-time emergency manager or one person shop. These are very vulnerable communities that we need to support. And so as these grant dollars are released, I hope that we can really talk about building capacity amongst emergency managers across the country. We should not have any part-time or one-shop emergency management offices. These are full-time responsibilities related to preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. By broadening the field and the capacity also in emergency management, we can also build a diverse workforce that we need. So we have people from the community who understand the community needs and are able to respond more effectively.
Mr. Brown, thank you so much. I am going to, at this time, recognize the ranking member, Ms. Kamick, for her questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman Demings, and thank you again to all of our witnesses here today and to our colleagues who have joined us. So this question is for all of our witnesses. Like so many of the challenges that we face, borders and countries all share similar challenges. So I'm going to pose this question to you all, starting with Mr. Brown. According to a recent media report, China now accounts for 27% of total global greenhouse gas emissions, which is now more than all other developed countries combined. Now, to me, this just seems like one more reason to add to the list of why China poses an increasing threat to our homeland security. And I am concerned when it comes to climate change issues that Beijing will benefit the most if we hamper American innovation via new regulations and efforts to stifle innovation. So to what extent do you see China's climate impacts as a concern to the United States homeland security?
Thank you, Ranking Member. I think that this is a global challenge that requires every country, every state and local government to rise up to the challenge and become energy efficient. We have started to pursue looking at changing our fleet to promote energy efficiency. That is occurring across the state government as well. And so every policy change to promote energy efficiency and as Mr. Nye mentioned, change the human impacts related to greenhouse gases would be appreciated and help to minimize the threat of climate change. Again, emergency managers are consequent managers. We deal with the impacts of climate change.
And Mr. Brown, I hate to reclaim my time here, but I asked specifically about China. I understand the state's perspective. With that, I'm gonna have to turn it over to Mr. Bill Nye. Mr. Nye, could you comment on China's climate impacts as a concern to United States Homeland Security?
Well, as we say, everything every single one of us does affects everyone in the world because we all share the air. So as people in China try to reach the level of service that we have in transportation and energy use here in the States and the Western world, they're going to use more and more energy. And what we want is for China and places in the developing world everywhere to skip the greenhouse gas intensive step and go to more energy efficient, more renewably produced energy systems and electric grids everywhere. And so this, as a guy, I was born in the States. I'm from the US. I want the US to be the world leader in this. Look around you. Almost everything that you're touching and using right now is manufactured in another country. This is the up and the downside of globalization. But as those other countries go into more manufacturing intensive economies, they are going to produce more greenhouse gases. So what we want to do is lead. Yes, I understand very much understand your concern about competition from China and so on. But this idea that if you give something to somebody, it means you've taken it from somebody else. This zero-sum idea is not going to work in the long run because we all only have one atmosphere. So let's be leaders. And I'll advocate again for wind, solar, geothermal energy, heat storage. And I would like us to take some risks and invest in fusion technologies. This could, as I like to say, change the world.
Now, Mr. Nye, and thank you for your comments. Before I jump to Ms. Williams, just quick yes or no, or
The gentlewoman's time. I'm sorry, please, you have 47 seconds.
I was
Please.
gonna say, don't short me, Chairwoman Deming. Mr. Nye, do you consider China to be a developing country?
No, it's in between. It's not easy to categorize it as one thing and the other. And when you go there, they're extraordinary cities with cranes on every block, and then the rural areas where people don't have clean
Turn it
water.
over to Ms. Williams for the remaining 20 seconds that I've got. Thank you. Ms. Williams, same question to you with regard to China's climate impacts as it relates to Homeland Security.
Well, I think we have very much established that increasing risks that are driving climate impacts and disaster impacts are a tremendous threat to our homeland. And we need to look at this globally. I think Mr. Nye and Mr. Brown highlighted the fact that this is a global conversation that the United States has an opportunity to lead. But we don't even talk about climate adaptation using the same language that other countries use. Adaptation, mitigation have different meanings here and there. And we need to make sure that we are leading by example, but that we are also engaged in the conversation using the same terms, a same common understanding of what we are trying to accomplish so that we can tackle those that are the greatest offenders at driving these risks and impacts.
The chair thanks Ms. Williams for her response and thanks the ranking member for her line of questions. At this time, the chair will now recognize other members for questions they may wish to ask the witnesses. In accordance with the guidelines laid out by the chairman and ranking member, I will recognize members in order of seniority, alternating between majority and minority. Members are also reminded to unmute themselves when recognized for questioning. The chair now recognizes for 5 minutes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Sheila Jackson Lee.
Thank you so very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to both of you, the ranking member, and as well the chair for this particular very important hearing. If I'm reminded, the reason why this is extremely important is because we are aware that despite the pressing need to address the risks proposed by climate change, the Trump administration disregarded these challenges, increased the likelihood that Americans would experience these risks, unfortunately. Very grateful that we are beginning to turn the corner with the Biden administration and the American Jobs Plan and the administration's budget proposal, which has aggressively looked to rectify President Trump's failures and directly address the challenges that are so very important. I want to pose a question to Mr. Nye, and I thank you for recounting the history that suggests in the work of your parents that when there is a crisis, we all pull together. Let me put on the record, of course, what I experienced in 2017 and what I recently experienced at the beginning of 2021. 2017, 21 trillion gallons of rainfall fell on Texas, Louisiana. Most of it was in the Houston Metroplex. I watched constituents of mine, a family of 6, wash away, not in an ocean, not in a river, but in a bayou that flowed over into the main streets. Harris County covers 1,778 square miles, and 41,500 square miles of landmass were impacted by Hurricane Harvey. That, I might say, was a catastrophic climate crisis. Then again, in 2021, unbeknownst to us, came when I say unbeknownst, unexpected, unbeknownst, came a freeze here in Texas with a grid that did not work, which saw about 100 people die. So if I might, Mr. Nye, taking those two catastrophic incidences, quite different, one coming in the summer months, unexpectedly, still trying to overcome, one coming in what is supposed to be winter, but we in Houston don't really know it that way, but life was lost. Could you explain the scientific relationship between greenhouse gases and larger scale climate events, such as what I've just represented to you, and for America to understand that the loss of life can continue to grow and grow under these natural, or maybe I should say unnatural disasters that have come about through the harshness of climate change and the inattentiveness that we have had over the decades. Mr. Nye?
Thank you very much. So the problem fundamentally, as the world gets warmer, the ocean gets warmer, the ocean then drives these storms. So it's as water vapor goes up in the sky and condenses back to liquid and rains, the circulation is driven harder and harder. And so climate models, and the word model refers to computer programs, we try to predict the fluid mechanics, the way the air and water move around. The storms are getting bigger and they're moving more slowly. So they're dropping more water in places like Houston. Then the other subtle problem, or once was subtle problem, is the jet stream, the circulation in the Northern Hemisphere, gets pushed up and down as the world's climate becomes less stable, as these storms move around. And that caused this cold snap in Texas. And then, I used to work in the oil field, and I have a sense of the prideful nature of Texans. I understand you had your own electrical grid, but it wasn't well enough secured against the weather.
Absolutely.
These sort of straightforward things were not done for years through, what my understanding, through free market ideas that this stuff would take care of itself, that any electrical grid any electrical supplier would of course invest in the necessary things to make sure things were safe. But apparently that is not what happened, and it was a catastrophe. This is what I talk all the time. We need all the regulations we need, but no more, but we do need regulations.
Can I quickly go to Mr. Brown for just a second? Thank you very much, Mr. Nye. When these disasters occur, you are the state coordinator, emergency management services. I imagine you deal with a lot of first responders, police, EMS, firefighters. Can you explain how, when these disasters occur, you put real human beings in the line of danger as they have to rescue persons, provide the first line of defense for saving people? Could you just give that information?
The gentlewoman's time has expired, but the witness may answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize. I cannot see that clock, but I thank you for your courtesy. Thank you so very much. Mr. Brown?
Thanks, Congresswoman. Thanks, Chairwoman. Yes, we help to coordinate all of the first responders who put their lives on the line when it comes to search and rescue, swift water rescue for the flooding events. They are right there to support our communities. And again, the capacity has been stretched using the grants that have been provided for the federal government. more is needed because of the higher frequency of these disasters, and they're occurring back to back, even overlapping. As I mentioned, as we are responding to COVID-19, we're still responding to all of these other events as well.
Thank you so very much. I yield.
Thank you. The gentlewoman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Iowa, Ms. Miller Meeks, for 5 minutes. I believe you're on mute. There. No, okay, yeah, one more time. You're. There, I think you're, there we go.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair Jennings and Ranking Member Katko and all of our panelists. With the rise in extreme weather events, it's worth noting that according to FEMA, roughly 40% of small businesses hit by natural disasters never reopen, and I've certainly seen this within our state of Iowa. Further, 90% of smaller companies fail within a year unless they can resume operations within 5 days. This is obviously devastating to the livelihoods of so many of my constituents, many of whom are small business owners and are facing severe catastrophic threats all year round, from flooding to tornadoes and to the derecho that we had last year. We know that increased pre-disaster mitigation activities and strong modern construction standards are the best line of defense in the face of catastrophes and will ultimately save taxpayer dollars while protecting lives. On that note, Ms. Williams, can you talk about the importance of Congress working to create incentives that encourage business owners, homeowners, and communities to build more resiliently?
Thank you, ma'am. I think the first question that these companies and businesses need to answer is, what are the risks that I face? The lack of knowledge of risk across this country is tremendous. You can't attack a risk that you aren't aware of. So I think that is the first line of defense, is coming together as a community to identify risks and hazards as a system, not as an individual structure or an individual piece of infrastructure, but systemically. And that's how we build community resilience. Insurance is a key aspect of this. Individuals and businesses are not aware of the lack of coverage that they are facing in the wake of a disaster. And the federal government is not going to provide the resources to make them whole. So we spend a tremendous amount of time trying to educate people on how to cover their risks in a very meaningful way. But as you noted, the most important thing that people can do is identify that risk, draw down that risk through investments in pre-disaster mitigation, and we'll change the trajectory of the risk profile across this country.
Thank you. And as I stated, as someone who represents a Midwestern state that runs along the Mississippi River, my district does not border the Missouri, but I also have the Missouri. We had flooding there last year, and then we had the derecho this past year. I have a deep understanding of the massive loss caused by flooding and other natural disasters. Because of this, I also know of the endless cycle of destruction, where homes are built over and over again in the same subpar standards that often help lead to their destruction, and it put communities' lives and taxpayer dollars at risk. Ms. Williams, again, can you talk about the power of strong construction in the face of catastrophes, how you and the insurance industry help to mitigate that risk and identify that risk, and any examples you have based on research performed by the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, which you mentioned in your testimony, where the use of more modern building standards are proven to help homes withstand extreme climate events? What policies can we be working to create in Congress that will better shield communities like mine in Iowa from severe disasters?
Thank you again. We have some very exciting things happening across this country as states are leading the way in helping individual homeowners invest in strengthening their home. And I know Mr. Brown probably has some comments on this too, as he's been keenly focused on underserved communities and how we can help strengthen their home. If COVID taught us anything, it's the importance of housing as infrastructure. So our friends at IBHF have done a tremendous job, not only identifying those retrofits of the existing housing stock that need investments for roof tie downs, for cripple wall stabilization, and for wildfire mitigation techniques that can significantly impact the risk posed to a homeowner. And we are working with states across the country to help put resources in the hands of homeowners to draw down their risk and invest in their homes. So I think Congress helping certainly remove, as Ms. Hill said, the moral hazard of not doing the right thing and not investing in your homes, I think is one of the most important things that congressional leaders can do. And as I mentioned in my testimony, tax incentives can also play a tremendous role for those that have the resources to be able to invest, to just get them over the hump, to do the right thing before a disaster and not when we're worried about recovering from catastrophe.
Thank you. And then I just wanted to make a mention to Mr. Nye or Dr. Nye. Thank you so much. And we found during the pandemic that there are regulations we no longer need. So as important as regulation is in safety, it's also important to realize when regulation is not needed. And I appreciate your comments on fusion and nuclear power as also an upcoming power source. So thank you.
Thank you so much. The gentlewoman's time has expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Payne, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. That was quick. I didn't even get a chance to recognize myself. But it's a real honor and privilege to be here once again. And thank you for this timely hearing that we're having today. Mr. Brown, as we continue to combat the effects of climate change, I'd like to know how historically disadvantaged people, and specifically people of color, could benefit from the new green technology, additional infrastructure spending, and private sector innovation. What are the steps that the federal government can take to deliver equitable relief to disadvantaged communities as we respond to climate crisis and extreme weather events?
Thank you, Congressman. I really think we need to be intentional in terms of getting resources to the communities that we know are on the front line of these disaster impacts. We have a lot of great innovative tools. We have data, we have census information, and we have the lived experiences of the communities and marginalized communities. Now we need to connect the dots and make sure that the resources, the BRIC program priority on marginalized communities actually get to these communities to reduce the impacts of climate change. We know that these communities are more at risk because of systemic and structural issues from the racism and discrimination from the past, such as redlining. There's a good study that was done from some Virginia professors that looked at the heat impacts within housing projects because of redlining. We need to be able to promote natural mitigation efforts and directly target those communities. And that's what we've done here in Virginia, prioritizing the communities that need the resources the most.
Thank you. You know, it's clear we've seen that situation before us, so we can remember the faces of Katrina and what most of those folks looked like that were stuck in that terrible situation. Let's see, Mr. Nye and Ms. Hill, vulnerable communities that were severely impacted by coronavirus remain vulnerable to other types of hazards, such as those brought on by climate crisis. Would you please share a few ways in which federal government can help poor and disadvantaged communities minimize those risks? Ms. Hill, and then Mr. Nye.
Thank you. The federal government has a critical role to play in assisting disadvantaged communities. And one of the key ways is, let's look at first the emergency response. We need to have better early warning systems in the United States. We could have 2 adjoining communities that have a very confusing system, and that would affect the ability of people to seek shelter in advance of an event. We also know that, unfortunately, many Americans don't have ready cash to evacuate easily, quickly from their communities. This was front and center with Katrina. We need to make sure that we build plans so that Americans can seek shelter immediately and have ready cash. Perhaps just send them cash immediately so they're out of their homes and headed towards safety. We also need to look at the cost benefit analysis of how we build infrastructure. Our infrastructure tends to favor wealthier communities than it does those who may be in most need and for whom it is most meaningful to have protective infrastructure. So that's changing the cost benefit analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Nye?
Well, I understand this idea that you want better evacuation routes, better early warning, and so on, but what we need big ideas to protect everybody. For example, in redlined areas, apparently there are fewer trees. So if you want to stay cool in the summer, you actually have to spend more money on air conditioning. It's a subtle thing, but it's a real problem. What we want to do is to have access to good food, access to good schools, and access to good health care for everybody. And that means providing all three of those things, and especially the internet to everybody in every community. Because when you don't have access to the internet, you're not included in our economy. You're not included in opportunities for jobs or saving money on purchases. And so we want that for everybody. Clean water, renewable electricity, access to the internet for everybody, and that takes investment. And I'll just say again, this idea of being resilient is a fine idea, but just everyone in my side of this, be very cautious of that word, because it has been used as a substitute for addressing the problem of putting too many greenhouse gases in the air.
Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garabino, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. My first question is for Ms. Williams. Specifically, the Biden administration recently announced that $1 billion in funding would be made available in fiscal year 2021 for the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Grant Program. In response to that announcement, you stated that the new resources in BRIC have made it even more imperative. We continue to work around the nation to prepare states and communities as they apply for funds. Going back to fiscal year 2020, what challenges did communities face when applying for BRIC funds, and how can FEMA ensure that communities are better equipped to apply for funds and the grants in the future?
Thank you, sir. Certainly, we are continuing to learn lessons from the 2020 iteration of BRIC. Those announced awards probably will not go out until July or August from FEMA. But as a community, emergency managers and state leaders alike are really taking a look at what were the obstacles that needed to overcome, what communities were not engaged in this conversation. I'm excited to say that every state, save one across the country, submitted applications for BRIC. And FEMA did take an unprecedented step to try to inform folks of what would be required, the new requirement standard criteria under which BRIC would be awarded. But there was so much more to do. And that's really where we need to leverage our private sector partners, our intergovernmental partners, to help build that capacity. One of the things that I think FEMA can do that will make the greatest impact as we go into 2021 is get out that notice of funding availability. We need to know what we are dealing with, the criteria under which we are applying for these programs, so that we can prioritize that. And as Mr. Brown said, we can identify those communities that are falling through the gaps and get them additional technical assistance. Last year, FEMA only targeted 10 communities for special technical assistance, where they actually deployed FEMA personnel to help leverage and increase that capability to apply for BRIC. We need to see more of that as we target these communities that we really are seeing underserved in these mitigation resources.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Mr. Brown, would you add anything additional to what FEMA should be doing with this new round of funding, or did Ms. Williams hit everything?
Thank you, Congressman. I think Ms. Williams hit everything. I go back to that technical assistance part of it. There is a designation for distressed communities that I don't think really comprehensively looks at all of the communities that need support. And so we need to be more expansive in terms of how we provide technical assistance and really guide folks through the whole mitigation grant development process, and also the management of it as well. These communities, again, are strapped and stressed. with the consistent impacts of disasters and need a little bit more support.
Great, I appreciate that. My next question is for Mr. Nye. And as the Republican co-chair for the Climate Solutions Caucus in Congress, I would love to actually work with all of you and find out some ideas legislatively that you think we can add on and the caucus can get behind. But Mr. Nye, your testimony mentions that to thwart climate change, larger actions need to take place, but preparedness and mitigation for extreme weather events begin at the individual local level. How should communities prepare to the unpredictability of future weather systems? And what mitigation techniques can best prepare a community so they're not overwhelmed by response and recovery efforts?
Well, that's a great question. We have an interstate highway system. You ask people to get on the road, I guess. But what we want to do is not have the storms be so severe to begin with. You know, this idea that you, like for example, in the case of a fire, if you have a house that's fireproof, you still have to leave. You can't be there during the fire. And when you get back, there's nothing left. So what we want to do is address these problems in a much bigger way. At the same time, we address them on local levels. As you all know, all politics is local. But still, the federal government has an enormous role in making sure that everybody is looked out for. And I think everybody agrees with these broad ideas. But when it's time to get going, that's when we have to, I believe, we have to invest. And I really encourage everybody to just stop and take a moment and understand the difference between getting a loan, getting into debt, versus spending money you don't have. They're two different big ideas. And I think it's time for the government to invest in a big way.
I appreciate that. And thank you very much. Yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you ever so much, Madam Chair. I thank the ranking member. And of course, I thank the chair of the full committee for all of his endeavors in this area. Mr. Nye made a salient point. He indicated that we must invest. And I completely, totally, and absolutely agree. But I do have a question for each of the witnesses, because there's something fundamental that we have to embrace before we can invest. And it is this: you have to acknowledge that the problem exists. We have a good many people who are opinion makers and opinion shapers who will not acknowledge that the problem exists. If you acknowledge that it exists, then you do something about it. If you decline to acknowledge that it exists, then you have no reason to do anything about a problem that doesn't exist. So let's start with Ms. Williams, and you'll each have approximately 1 minute, and I'll let you know when your time is up. Tell me, what would you say to my contemporaries, my colleagues, the opinion makers and opinion shapers who refuse to acknowledge that the problem exists? What would you say to cause them to conclude that yes, we have the problem, and yes, we must invest? Ms. Williams.
All we need to do is turn to facts and science. We have seen a tremendous uptick in the severity and frequency of these climate impacts and of disaster impacts. I'm excited to say that IBHS has led the way for the insurance industry, even issuing a statement on the importance of adaptation and the science that has supported the movement across the industry and the sector, that we have to do something about it. This
Williams,
trajectory.
let me intercede for a second and do this for you. I'm going to give you a little bit of additional time because of what you said. What do you say to people who have their own set of facts? They conclude that what you say is not necessarily what the facts reveal. What do you say to them?
I have experience, I was with your staff and Ms. Jackson Lee's staff, even in the wake of Hurricane Ike. And let's just look at over the last 8 years, what we've experienced in the increase in just what Texas has experienced. My experience is wholly different. Science supports that experience, that these disasters are being driven by climate change and that they are increasing, and that if we don't do anything about it, we cannot sustain this trajectory.
Let me move on to Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Congressman. Again, as an emergency manager, deal with the consequences of the impacts of climate change. We believe in the science and the data in Virginia. and we've seen the consequences of more frequent flooding events, hurricanes. It was our busiest hurricane season as it was last year with the Atlantic hurricane season, mudslides out in Southwest Virginia in the mountains. We've seen the impacts of more and more of these disasters, tornadoes, et cetera. We've had more state of emergency declarations in the last 5 years than we have historically.
I have to intercede. Ms. Hill, please.
Yes, well, I draw on my background for this. I was a judge for 13 years on the Los Angeles Superior Court. And that capacity, I heard evidence, guided jury trials based on scientific evidence. And the science is clear here beyond any standard of proof in any courtroom. And that's why you're seeing courts across the United States accept that climate change is occurring. The question for all of us, as this panel is very focused on, is what do we do about it? So going forward, we need to focus on what the science has told us and the choices that are ahead.
Thank you, Your Highness. Mr. Knight.
Well, as you may know, I at first I've fought this for 30 years, trying to get people to accept the science of climate change. I offered 4 bets to 2 notorious climate deniers. I offered them $10,000 that 2016 would be the hottest year on record, 2010, 2020 be the hottest decade on record. Neither one of them would take either of the bets. I had $40,000 right there. They wouldn't take the bets because I think they're scared. We're all frightened. This thing is overwhelming. And if you don't believe me, look, there have been these studies lately worldwide, people are having fewer and fewer children. That's because women and men are a little reticent to bring a kid into the world where the world's on fire. So everybody we're in this together. We've got to fight this fight together. I'm scared too. So let's get to work. Clean water, renewable energy, access to the internet for everybody, and we can change the world.
Mr. Nye, let me just close with this. Clear and convincing evidence does exist, but there are some people who decline to accept clear and convincing evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from New Jersey, Ms. Watson Coleman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses who presented today. Your information has been very enlightening to me. I'm really interested in exploring this whole issue of modern disaster resilient codes in municipalities. And I'm wondering, what are the kind of incentives or support that the federal government needs to engage in and provide that would help these municipalities update their codes? Or what's stopping them from doing that? I'll start with you, Ms. Williams.
Thank you, ma'am. As I stated, the single most important thing we can do is get people in modern, not only adopted, but enforced building codes. And the federal government does have a tremendous role that can be played. Certainly with the passage of DURA, making eligible activities related to the adoption and enforcement of building codes eligible for mitigation assistance was a key step, providing those federal resources to help communities. But again, we are still at the education stage. We need to help communities understand what gains they will accomplish in resiliency by adopting these codes. And FEMA last November did a tremendous job, did a study that showed that over the last 20 years, in communities that have adopted building codes, $32 billion of damages are being avoided. That's huge. Again, data, science is showing that the proof is in the pudding. The best investments you can make are in the adoption of building codes. Furthermore, they found that on average, the increased cost of these resiliency measures in home construction is less than 2%. So again, we have a tremendous opportunity to not only leverage education, but resources, particularly at the most underserved communities, to help get them to not only building smarter, but truly retrofitting the existing housing stock.
Thank you. Hey, Mr. Brown, would you like to comment on that? And do you have any idea what we'd be talking about the additional resources, the amount of resources that we are lacking here?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think incentives and support, as Ms. Williams mentioned, the proof is in the pudding. The building codes result in better resilience. I'm happy to say Virginia has some of the strongest building codes in the country. We have seen the impact and result of that. And so working with local governments, providing additional resources, showing them the data and the information will hopefully get them to support enhancing their building codes.
So we already have resources that are available to municipalities that wish to embrace these additional and modern and resilient building codes. And some municipalities have not. Do we need additional resources to help them get there? If so, what do you think we're talking about?
I do know that the BRIC program, building code support is a allowable expense. And so with that additional $500 million, hopefully that will promote incentives for educating and supporting enhancing building codes on the local level.
So thank you. This is a New Jersey question, and this is a just sort of a general question having to do with, findings of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change when they released a report stating in order to avoid temperature rising 1.5 degrees Celsius, et cetera, the world had to take drastic changes to reduce greenhouse gases in 12 years. That was 3 years ago. And even with the writing on the wall, we still see people who are denying. And we're also seeing incremental steps being taken where we think we need bold action. In the state of New Jersey, we had a horrific storm with Hurricane Sandy. And not only did we lose significant properties on the coastline, but we even lost interior properties where you found even lower income individuals. They're still recovering. We still need resources and we still need changes. What is the role of the federal government in terms of bold versus incremental that will help us get there? Dr. Nye, Mrs. Williams, and Ms. Hill, I'd like to hear from you quickly on that.
Boy, if you want to do something bold, let's invest in fusion energy. I'm not saying it'll work, but let's take a chance. Then another thing that just is an accident, by that I mean legislatively, the Jones Act, where you can't erect a wind turbine off of the coast of Virginia without taking your ship to Nova Scotia to bring it back down to Hampton Roads to erect a wind turbine. This is going to take, look, I'm in 2 unions. I understand what it is to work union. It's going to take negotiation with unions, negotiation with shipbuilders. It's going to take investment in building those big ships that can erect those things. Then if we could somehow negotiate with the shipping industry so that we didn't burn this bunker fuel oil. This is the dirtiest petroleum product going, and it's all over the world, and we all rely on these ships. If we had standards that required ships to have cleaner emissions, and you couldn't dock your ship in the US port unless you had a clean emission ship that was certified by a clean emission ship council someplace, you could change the world.
Yeah, thank you, Dr.
Incremental steps that would have a huge effect.
I appreciate that. I just read some stuff about that that was very telling. Ms. Hill, may I have some comments?
The gentlewoman's
chair, I don't know. Okay.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. We may have time for a second round of questions. So thank you so much. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Clark, for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank our ranking member for this very important hearing today. I want to thank our panel's experts for providing us with some insights and certainly your expert opinions and factual-based opinions on what our nation needs to do to really mitigate the damages and address fully the climate crisis that's before us. I'm going to pick up on a theme that my colleague, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman, just expressed during her comments. And it's the fact that in a new 2021 report from the United Nations found the average global temperature is now consistently 1 degree Celsius hotter than it was only about 100 years ago in the late 1800s. And meteorologists expect the global temperature to continue rising to 1.5 degrees Celsius or warmer by the middle of this century. Unless drastic action is taken to lower global greenhouse gas emissions, full stop. So Dr. Nye, can you describe some of the most dangerous global implications of climate change on human populations, such as migration, such as droughts, such as agricultural capacity, as we move toward that pivotal 1.5 degrees Celsius benchmark? Dr. Nye, I think you may be muted.
Excuse me. The effects are potentially quite large, astonishingly large. If we get these 5 storms happening in around the world at the same time, which is some computer models suggest, we would have to invent a Category 6 hurricane. This would be devastating to coastal communities. People live there, especially people lower income, live in lower elevation neighborhoods. As the water pattern, rainfall patterns shift from west to east with the shifting jet stream, there'll be more fires out west and there'll be less agriculture there. If you live in the Eastern time zone, as half of the United States and Canada do, a lot of your food comes from that agricultural area. If it's not possible to grow food there and we continue to tap into the aquifer and drain the water, that ancient water that we rely on for our agriculture right now, we'll run out of food. I have colleagues at the University of Copenhagen who are very concerned about what happens in the heartland of North America, because that's where their food is grown. When we displace coastal populations, people who live on the coast are going to go looking for jobs. Where are they going to go? Where are they going to live when they get there? What's going to happen to all the material that they left behind, the copper pipes and wiring and all that electrical grid equipment? What's going to happen to that? And if you like to worry about things, you're living at a great time. If we accidentally destroy the electrical grid, we do not have the capability right now to build new transformers. Those of you who live in Texas remember this infamous picture of the sparks going down the wire and the transformers exploding. Well, we'll just make new transformers. No, in order to make transformers, you need electricity. Well, you can't get electricity because you don't have transformers. Okay, it's the kind of thing that we need to prepare for. These are huge problems. And the sooner we get started and the sooner we accept that we're all in it together, the sooner we're going to get it done.
Thank you, Dr. Nye. Ms. Hill, could you please describe how these climate changes will lead to, and in some instances are already leading to, international instability, such as the rise in extremism and violence? Because, I don't think we are really talking about the global impact that we face.
Thank you. This is a very important question. We have seen that these types of extreme events can have dramatic impacts on national security and global security. Because climate change affects human security, access to fresh water, livelihoods, food, it really cuts at the heart of the stability of people's lives. So we saw in Syria a migration after the worst drought in 1,200 years of millions of people to other areas in Syria, mostly young men, highly destabilizing for the receiving communities. And then, in addition to many other factors, we saw migration heading towards Europe. We have seen bad actors, terrorists, organized crime take advantage of extreme events to recruit and expand their territory. During flooding in Pakistan, the Taliban used the opportunity of the government's ineffective response to the flooding to attempt to recruit new members within their ranks. We see this also occurring with ISIS and other terrorist organizations. It's a huge vulnerability for the United States as these impacts cut across the globe. There will be people who are suffering, and in their time of need, they will be highly vulnerable to organized crime and other networks, including extremists who want to increase their influence. So we need to help them at home.
And thank you, and I yield back, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Barragan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Demings, for holding this important hearing on the national security threats that climate change poses to security of our country and our constituents. Without major action by the United States and countries around the world to reduce emissions, we are at risk of global temperature increases of 3, 4, or even 5 degrees Celsius. I believe that we need to make clear to the American people that this would mean that we have to take bold action to head off this dangerous future, something that we will start to do with the American Jobs Plan. We heard, Mr. Nye, you gave the analogy that I really loved about climate and our planet and a 747 airliner. That really resonated with me, and I thought it was a great analogy. And I want to take that analogy one step further. You know, if our Earth were the 747, right now we've seen the 1% degrees Celsius warming. We're experiencing with only that 1% significant turbulence from that change in our climate, stronger droughts and wildfires and hurricanes. And so, Mr. Nye, I was going to ask you, what would the state of that 747 be and our planet on our homeland be if we were to get to the 3%, the 4%, or the 5% degrees of Celsius of warming? I know you spoke a little bit about this. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Well, the climate models are accurate. The computer models have proven repeatedly to be robust. I referred earlier to the study that Exxon kept internal in the 1970s, and then in 1982 is the famous document or infamous document. They were concerned with, as the state of the art of the computer modeling at that time was doubling of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And they predicted that the poles would be more severely affected or have greater swings in temperature and more ice melting. And that's proven to be true. They talked, and doubling the amount of carbon dioxide would take it from, in those days, 340 parts per million to 680. Well, my friends, were well over 400 and parts per million, or 415 and worldwide. And as it gets bigger and bigger, the effects are going to get stronger and stronger. Now, you've heard people say this, but trust the science, everybody. It's a real thing. And I like to remind everybody who's watching.
Thank you.
In the U.S., which is available in Paper 8, Clause 8, refers to the progress of science and useful arts. This is in the Constitution. The progress of science is in our economic interest. So everybody, the computer models have proven to be true. Let's get to work, reduce greenhouse emissions, and do these other financial and investment things that people have discussed at this meeting. But first, as we've all discussed, we have to acknowledge that we have the problem and get to work.
Thank you so much for that. Ms. Hill, you spoke about how climate will drive increase in migration. On an international scale, warming climate is impacting migration patterns. We have to think through humane solutions to accommodate migrants displaced by climate change. Ms. Hill, there are many factors that contribute to immigration, but climate change isn't discussed enough. Upwards of 20 million people are displaced by weather-related disasters each year. This is happening in our own backyard, driving people from their homes and to our borders. Could you describe how extreme weather events worsened by climate change are causing displacement and migration that can undermine homeland security?
Yes, we are seeing the pressure right now at our southern border. We are seeing Central Americans come in unprecedented numbers. When I was at the Department of Homeland Security, I oversaw the first surge of unaccompanied alien children from those countries. We have examined the factors that are causing that drive in migration. There are many, as you've said, but one of them is new extremes that are affecting agriculture, drought, coffee rust, and then as livelihoods are affected, it gives opportunity for criminal gangs to expand their territory. It becomes more dangerous for those, and we see young people on the move, headed north in search of a better life. We do not have the legal framework internationally to accommodate what we call, commonly referred to as climate refugees. Under our international law, there is no such thing as a climate refugee. So as you so importantly point out, we need to come up with a better system to address the flows of migration that will be driven by climate change. We're already seeing unprecedented people on the move just this year in terms of even in the midst of a pandemic. And 3/4 of approximately 40 million people on the move were driven by climate extremes, droughts, floods, and other acute events that cause people to leave their homes. We need a plan, and we don't have one yet.
Thank
The
you.
gentlewoman's time has expired. Thank you so much. I want to thank our panel for their expertise and their patience. As you can see, this is such a critical topic, and this is so timely. We do have time for another round. If you members would like to ask additional questions, please turn on your cameras. And at this time, the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am grateful for the second round, and I have a continuation of the first, but with just a different twist. And I was hoping that we would have a second round, to be quite candid with you. Here is the twist. Let us assume that we have the legislation to do the big, bold things that you would have us do, dear friends. And let us assume that to do these big, bold things, we have to do them without the consent of everyone. Let's just assume that we have people who have similar ideas willing to move forward together. And these persons who are willing to move forward together happen to be of the same party. Here is the question for you. And I ask this because everybody wants bipartisan support for what we do, and as do I, by the way. I welcome bipartisan support. But if we get to the big things, the things that you've talked about, and we want to accomplish these big things and we don't have the bipartisan support, do we move forward and do the big things? Or do we wait until we can get the support that everybody wants? Mr. Nye, what say you?
Well, you got to work the problem from both ends. And I will
Mr.
say,
Nye, if I may intercede, Mr. Nye, let's take the world that I live in and deal with it, if you don't mind. The world that I live in, dear brother, dear friend, Mr. Nye, whom I have great respect for. I hold you in the highest of esteem. But the world that I live in is one wherein we have some who believe one thing and some who believe another. And they are guided by their beliefs to the extent that they are directed by with their votes. So now my question is, what do I do if I can go forward and do these big things, but I can't do them in a bipartisan way? What do I do?
well, if you're asking me, you go for it. But the problem I think everybody should be aware of.
Well, I appreciate that. Your answer is that we should go for it. Okay,
No,
I appreciate that. Ms. Hill, what do you say we do?
Hang on.
So
I'm going to come back to you for the go for it. Ms. Hill,
That was
what do
an
we do?
attention-getting opening line, sir.
I understand, but I'm going to have to go on. I'll come back to you. Ms. Hill, what do we do?
I think that we should lay as much foundation as we can for the time when we will have bipartisan support for this
So
effort.
until your answer is until we get bipartisan support, we shouldn't go forward.
No, we should be laying the groundwork and
Let's assume we've laid the foundation and we don't have the bipartisan support. This is the world that I live in. If we don't have the support, what do we do?
I think there's much we can do without bipartisan support, and of course, in partnership with the administration.
So
I think there are
would say
executive
go
actions
forward?
that can be taken. Yes, we need to move forward in
Move
every
forward. All
avenue
right,
that we
thank you,
can.
Ms. Hill. I
Yes.
greatly appreciate it. I'm so sorry about the time. Mr. Brown, what do we do in the world that I live in?
Congressman, I think bold action is needed. These are life or death and urgent issues. And that's why I mentioned appreciating the executive action that the administration has taken to provide more resources.
So
and
is your answer go forward?
Bold action is needed, sir, to move forward.
So does that mean move forward, Mr. Brown? Unfortunately, I've been trained to ask questions to the extent that I get an answer.
It means move forward, sir.
All right.
Bold action.
Ms. Williams and Professor Nye, believe me, I'm coming back to you, Mr. Nye. Ms. Williams, what do you say?
Absolutely move forward. We laid foundation 20 years ago of things that we are accomplishing today that at one time was not bipartisan. You must move forward. It's imperative for us to be transformational and to act big.
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. All right, now,
So-
Mr. Nye, I'm coming back to you, and my clock is not up, so I don't see how much time that I have left because I have a comment that I would like to give. Madam Chair, can you just quickly tell me how much
You
time I
have
have?
46 seconds.
Okay, well, Mr. Nye, you can have 20 of my 46.
Well, we got to make sure that the next election is secure, and I mean it in the traditional way. If we end up with a situation in the US where we have minority rule through gerrymandering, through these extraordinary laws that people are trying to pass, it's going to be trouble for everybody, for the minority especially. I lived in Washington State for a long time. I vote in California now. I have voted mail-in for over 40 years. And look, I'm fine. Everybody,
Well,
we
I
can
gotta
do
take
this.
10 of my seconds, Mr. Nye, so I take it you still say move forward.
Yes, and
And,
my understanding, it's different
and
in
I
having
appreciate that.
representatives from the Senate. So,
Let me close out with this. Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, if I could just have just a second. This committee does do a lot of things in a bipartisan fashion. So I don't want you to think that these comments were directed to the persons on this committee. But I live in a world that is outside of the committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. The gentleman from Texas yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Barragan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And this conversation is just so interesting. I had to stay on for the second round. Mr. Nye, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to let you finish your answer that you were given. Given that we're limited to 5 minutes, so Mr. Nye, is there something you want to conclude with on that last thought that you had?
well, it's not in anybody's best interest to not have everybody's vote count. And it certainly looks like people are working to try to suppress votes. And this is catastrophic. I know everybody waves their hands about this, but we're all in this together. When we have this situation with continual deadlock, it's keeping us from taking action on climate change. So let's let everybody vote. Let's get people who accept the science and as per the Constitution, and let's move forward. And I understand it's a frightening time. I get it, but we are all more alike than we are different. We have more in common than we have differences. So let's get together. And this notion of trying to pass these enormous bills, I don't work in your world, but if we could pass a few bills and chip away, the longest journey begins with a single step. Perhaps we can get things done, but I just encourage everyone to realize how serious this problem of climate change is, how it affects everyone on Earth, and how we've got to work together to move forward. Everything is bad when we let these climate effects affect so many people.
Thank you, Mr. Nye. I could not agree with you more. And it is hard when in Congress, you have the leader of one party say, hey, we're just going to oppose everything the president is trying to do. And that makes it more challenging to reach that bipartisanship. But I wholeheartedly support it and do hope that we get our friends, as we've been hearing on this very hearing, on both sides of the aisle, talking about climate change and the threat to our homeland. We've got to work together. Mr. Nye, I want to go back to something you wrote in your testimony about building utility systems that work all the time and robust electric grids. One resilient solution I have strongly supported is clean energy microgrids to help keep the lights on when there are widespread power outages from a disaster. Can you talk about how clean energy microgrids can be a resilience and climate solution?
Oh, that's a great question. And there's a wonderful analogy. When our electrical grid was created, we developed power plants. The bigger, the more efficient they could be. Well, now with solar and wind and geothermal, the smaller, in many regards, the more efficient they are. In the same way, we hand a phone call from one cell to another. A mobile phone goes from cell to cell. Now with the satellite systems, we will hand the internet from a constellation member to satellite to satellite. We can use that same sort of technology to have distributed power generation on the roof of every, for example, big box store, and then connect it with a much more sophisticated set of software systems, so that when the power is not available one place, it's available somewhere else. If you want to invest in something, and I hope we all do, let's invest in battery technologies. Let's invest in heat storage and geothermal. And as I said earlier, I've met some people that make me think that fusion is not as strange as it used to be. And so I would like to have us invest in all those things and have the power distributed in a much more sophisticated way than we do now.
Thank you, Mr. Nye. Mr. Brown, with the 1 minute left, can I also get your perspective on clean energy microgrids as a resilience solution?
Yes, Congresswoman. Yes, I definitely think that is needed. We saw the impacts just a couple of weeks ago on the pipeline cyber attacks. So we need to focus on building resilience, using the best technology possible, doing things a different way. During disasters, first responders need these tools in order to save lives. And so we need to make those investments, any federal support to support innovation on the state level for implementing those strategies would be definitely supported.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you again, Chairwoman, for this hearing. I think we have heard a little bit about how it's so important we invest in our infrastructure, our critical infrastructure in particular, and what it means if it goes down and what kind of a threat that would be for the homeland and for being a terrorist threat. And so with that, Madam Chairwoman, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back, and thank you so much. I really appreciate all of the participants in this hearing. This issue is real, and people expect for us to, number one, acknowledge it and not just say something, but to do something. I want to thank all of you, but particularly the gentleman from Texas and Florida, but all of you. We'd rather not go it alone, but we certainly have to be prepared to go it along because we have to do something about this critical issue. I don't see any more members on my screen, at least, so I would just like to end with 2 additional questions, if I may. I did have to step out for a minute, so if we discuss this, please forgive me. But recently, Secretary Mayorkas announced the launch of the DHS Climate Change Action Group, and we're excited about that commitment and really the potential for what this group can do to address this issue. So this question goes to all of the witnesses. What issues would you recommend the group examine to help our nation confront the threats posed by the climate crisis? And what are some of the actions you recommend the Department of Homeland Security take to respond to the climate crisis? And so, Ms. Williams, we'll start with you.
Thank you, ma'am. I do think that investment in our critical lifeline infrastructure is one of the most important focuses that we can have with regard to climate impacts and disaster impacts. And one of the things that does concern me is making sure that disaster impacts and severe catastrophic weather is something that is at the forefront of the Homeland Security conversation, because when our communities aren't safe, our homeland is not safe. And with those increased vulnerabilities, we must tackle that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hill.
Yes, well, I led the creation of the DHS roadmap for climate adaptation for President Obama. There are a number of things that the department could immediately do. The thing that I would call out is the department should be a leader in this space. Of all our departments across the federal government, it has the broadest reach, the deepest reach into our state, local, tribal leaders, and those communities. Everyone needs assistance in risk communication, understanding how to bolster critical infrastructure, deal with cascading impacts of climate change, and the DHS should step forward and lead among its fellow federal agencies to accomplish real resilience for the United States, including that national resilience plan that you mentioned, Chairwoman Demings.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hill. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I really believe the federal government and DHS in particular can support state, local, and tribal governments with additional resources and technical assistance, streamline some of their processes to get resources to the communities that need the support the most, the marginalized communities, the frontline communities that are going to continue to face the greatest impacts of climate change as we move forward.
Mr. Nye, you talked earlier about, looking at other countries. Yeah, we need to do that, but the U.S. should be a world leader on this issue. What would your answer be to this question?
Let's be a world leader. What I'm hoping is that we will cultivate a generation of civil servants that people believe in and trust. And the civil servants in this case are people that do land use planning, people that plan the robust electrical grid that has distributed generation sources, and hiring the kind of engineers, coders, developers who will prevent a cyber attack of any kind. And they would work for the US government. They would take pride in their work. We would trust them. They would prefer to work for the government rather than the private sector because of the job satisfaction you get from that.
Ms. Jackson,
when I think about my colleagues in Denmark, a friend of mine married a Danish guy because she says she could live the American dream. People are right now saying that Venezuela is a model of socialism, maybe, but in Denmark, they have these distributed systems. They have public health care. They have these things, and they have huge corporations. So if we were to invest in, I keep bringing up fusion, if we were to invest 100 million in fusion companies, then private investors would show up after the government showed leadership in this. And that's an example. But we
Thank you so much.
Let's go.
With the time that I have left, to all of the witnesses again, what actions specifically do you think FEMA should take to better address the climate crisis? FEMA. We'll start with you, Mr. Nye.
Make sure that people have access to the internet so they know what's going on in the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Brown. We're going to go to you.
Thanks, Chairwoman. There's multiple reports that talks about the inequities in FEMA programs that need to be eliminated to support the marginalized communities that are on the front line. I think addressing that would be the most urgent issue.
Thank you. Ms. Hill.
Review all of its programs in light of the risk placed by climate change, as well as on the disproportionate impact on certain communities in the United States.
Ms. Williams.
I think all of that can be also summed up in capacity and capability for our state, local, and tribal governments. If they can't be successful, it doesn't matter how many resources we throw at it. So that capability building is just key and crux to this issue, and FEMA's in the best position to do that.
Thank you so much. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, thank you so very much. And I wish to raise my questions with Ms. Hill, and I will try to combine them. Whenever we begin to talk about climate change, opponents consistently say that mitigation efforts are too costly. I'd like your response as to whether or not there's a cost-benefit analysis in investing in mitigation. And then in your experience at DHS, do you perceive, as I do, that the climate catastrophes really impact on domestic and national security? If you could combine those questions, and then I have another question. Thank you so very much. Ms. Hill?
Yes, for those who say that it's too costly to reduce our emissions, I can only respond, look at the costs we're already incurring right now from climate impacts. And as we've heard, these impacts will worsen over time. They're permanent, and they will cause lasting change. Virtually every system we have depends on a stable climate. We no longer have a stable climate. So we will have enormous economic costs involved. And when we have economic loss, we have threats to the national security. And we are seeing those play out already across the globe. And it will be a challenge for the United States to respond to the number of humanitarian crises that we will see as a result of climate events. We can't in any way respond to the type of events that we'll see in a meaningful way unless we cut our emissions, as we've heard here today. So military is already busy at work preparing itself, but there's tremendous amounts to be done. Our military installations are not operational and effective yet in the face of what we will see. We will need to bolster them as well at also an enormous cost.
Well, I think we will find out if we can educate the American public how broad the landscape is that climate change impacts their very life, their very uh, degree of security, their very bottom line dollar. Then maybe we would be able to be very successful in going big on the American Jobs Plan. But I had to deal with, believe it or not, the question of risk mapping in my own community, dealing with a whole series of neighborhoods that were mapped into a high flood area, losing their property in terms of its worth, and asking them literally to move out. And we gathered FEMA and began to be able to reorder that map and save their homes, got them to shore up their homes, if you will. So I'd be interested in your testimony. You state the United States lack comprehensive risk mapping that is sufficiently downscaled to inform Americans. I agree with you. Would you expand on that concept, please? Because I think that is extremely important. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, suppose you're a homeowner or a prospective renter, or you're a part-time mayor of a small town somewhere, and you want to figure out what are the risks I'm going to face, my community faces. You cannot get an answer to that today. In the world's wealthiest nation, you cannot get to a property level answer. You might be able to get it if you have a lot of money and could pay a consultant, but that is no way for us to operate in the United States. Everyone should be able to determine what's ahead and then make better decisions going forward. And that will take an enormous investment by the federal government, but it's one we need to make now. And we will see if we don't, that we will have developed in areas that are at greater risk in ways that are risky, and then we will have even greater economic impacts in the future. So it's a step, very important step the nation needs to take now.
Mr. Nye, just a quick question to you. Everybody says it's the buck. It's the buck. Too expensive. And we can't go big on the American Jobs Plan, dealing with infrastructure, climate change, job creation. What do we say to those who want to use money, as I've asked Ms. Hill, to be an excuse for not going big on climate infrastructure rebuild?
Well, try what I say to all climate change. Like sometimes they call themselves extreme skeptics. What is it about it that you think is not true? What is it about the situation you think that makes you mistrust all the world scientists? And then in Texas, you are the perfect, I mean, in a grim way, a very good example of the money you could save by addressing climate change. The estimates, latest estimates of the last blackout were $130 billion. That certainly could have been addressed for a fraction of that. I've seen two numbers, but let's say about 4 billion. That's a fraction of what it will ultimately cost to deal with that. And by the way, we're all going to pay for it. It's the US, we're all in this together. And so what we want to do is anticipate this, not in a disrespectful way, but you guys, we've got to take care of this. We got to take care of each other. And so I say all the time, this is doable. And the longest journey starts with a single step. Let's get going. And on the social justice issue, or whatever it's called, diversity, inclusion, equity, intersectionality, everybody, when you have people living near you who are disadvantaged, it affects everybody's quality of life. Certainly it affects the disadvantaged people. People who live at lower elevations, the flood hits them harder, they have to move and so on. But it affects everybody because we're all in this together and we all end up having to take care of each other. Now, this sounds like common sense, but I understand that your job is quite difficult because you have to do these big negotiations. But I want everybody to embrace the idea that taking care of each other actually saves money. We actually come out ahead when we anticipate these problems and address them before there's a cold snap and the grid goes down.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for this very good hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentlewoman's time has expired. With that, I want to thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and to our members for your questions. The members of the subcommittee may have additional questions for the witnesses, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. Without objection, the committee record shall be kept open for 10 days. Without objection, The subcommittee stands adjourned. Thank you all so very much. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.